Atal'Dazar played?
God, I hope for Self-Reliance's cause that it doesn't go to a game 3, because we saw Couch Pepega go into AD and actually just beat Perplexed. So if I were Self-Reliance, I would not be thrilled at the proposition of Couch Pepega taking it to the game 3. However, I guess we're about to find out what's about to happen with the first match here in King's Rest.
Zara, do you know a handy way to figure out whether it's bolstering or not in these dungeons?
What's that?
It's Triple Hunter right now, and both teams are running it. So if there's Triple Hunter, it's probably a good bet that we're facing some Triple Bolstering and Tyrannical on top of that.
Yeah, well, you know, Hunters are just good about dealing with everything, so I'm not too surprised to see them in here. Believe it or not, they're a good class for the MDI. Otherwise, we wouldn't be seeing 6 of them, right?
I'm kind of consistently getting little like flashbacks, and this is like the redemption that Hunters have been waiting for. Because you remember back when you played in the MDI, way back then. Way back when Hunter wasn't so good. And it wasn't that Hunter was bad on live servers or anything like that, but it was also like the scaling, if I remember correctly, it was like the scaling of the dungeons. They just weren't really doing as much damage as some of the other premier DPS that you'd bring along, right?
Well, if I remember specifically one of the things that happened is every single player that played a Warlock played a Hunter for Maw of Souls and Time Trials, because Warlocks, there was some scaling issue with Warlocks, right? But the second they fixed that scaling issue, every single Warlock player was like, all right, done with Hunter, back to Warlock. That class is gone forever. And we really haven't seen him in the MDI since then. Already problems, though, for Self-Reliance.
You know, Harudra going down the side of Self-Reliance, and they're not having any other deaths. The Hunter pets are going everywhere. Oh, and then they're all gone. As it looks like it was one of the bolstered casts from...
And then they lost it?
Did they have one of them?
What?
They did. They lost it as well after he died.
Now?
Wait,
what?
Yeah. Mikkel's the only one left standing as he turtles and is just trying to add some extra damage, and...
Maybe they can actually cut this out. There's only 3 mobs left, but they're all bolstered.
They're slow.
They're all bolstered. That animated Guardian, even though it's a 10% health, it probably has 10 to 15 bolstering stacks on it, so it's probably got a couple million HP still, and that's a big Guardian.
It is
it's
big
a Hunter.
lad.
You can probably kite it out, though.
Yeah, but the room's not totally clear yet.
True. They can use pet taunts to move it away, though, if they play this properly.
Yep.
So not full wiping here is pretty insane. And you have to remember that Bloodlust isn't on every single one of their players. It's only on the 200s that stayed alive, so it's not really that big of a loss. They'll still have that available for the boss for the other players.
That is fascinating that they used it after Harudra went down onto that one. But Harudra's trying to tank it out the rest of the way. He does get the heroic leap out, and they're just still continuing to chew through his HP. As Couch Pepega, as per usual, is having a clean run while Self-Reliance is just struggling here.
Yeah, I mean, it's business as usual for Couch Pepega. And like we mentioned a little bit on the cast earlier today, they've had so much time to practice the potential dungeons in this series for the past probably 6 hours at this point that it shouldn't come as too surprising that they should be playing clean here. But at the same time, Self-Reliance has had that much time too, and seeing them have that small mistake, or actually rather large mistake, right at the start of the dungeon, you know, they probably got some nerves going through the system right now.
I think so, and maybe part of it is because of the expectations of having some good veterans on their team, having a lot of experienced players on their team, and just not really hitting their stride as it usually is. I mean, we've seen at least, you know, a hefty amount of these guys in the MDI, in high keys, in competitive rating and everything like that, and at this point it's just a matter of putting those pieces together and, you know, finding success. And seeing Harudra taking quite a beating right now as they're trying to just clear up the rest of the trash, as Couch Pepega 20% left on Golden Serpent.
I mean, this is pretty disastrous for Self-Reliance. They're just now clearing up the trash and spawning the Golden Serpent at the same time that Couch Pepega is finishing it off. This is such a massive advantage in terms of the dungeon, and we're only 3.5 minutes in. It's going to take some massive discrepancy in the way that Couch Pepega is playing, or playing the dungeon in general, just playing in general. They've been clean pretty much in every dungeon so far. And I don't really see them stopping. These guys are machines. They're playing really well.
Yeah, and that's one of the probably the best things we've seen out of this whole tournament this weekend, is that there's been a lot of teams who have stepped up their game, who have grown, and the level of competition in the European region is absurdly high right now.
Oh yeah, and the thing to mention as well, though, and I want to focus a little bit on this as well, is how well Self-Reliance played that pull to where it didn't just turn out into a full team wipe and then reset the Guardians. That would have been an even larger time loss. That probably could have been an extra minute and a half on the board. So the fact that those 2 hunters in the form of Asheville and Mikkel were able to stay alive for that entire pull and finish off the trash while their teammates are running back, that's going to be the thing that allows them back into the dungeon should Couch Pepega end up having problems and having a wipe later on. That will give them a much higher chance of coming back and winning this dungeon. So the fact that they were even able to pull that off keeps them in this dungeon just that much more.
Yeah, and that's a good way of putting it in perspective as well, where we're like, oh man, this is disastrous Couch Pepega has its great lead ahead of them. And we're you know, relatively speaking, you know, most key groups, for example, are not able to have that level of recovery, that level of, you know, improvisation to keep it alive and to keep it going. And that's one thing we saw at Method EU earlier today when they had their great comeback on Underrot. They completely, fully healed the boss after they killed all the mobs under Sanguine. They lost their tank. They lost a couple deeps. They started kiting out, running all over the place. They were able to res up and then regain their momentum. You know, that's what we want to see out of, hopefully, every team as well. And Self-Reliance has just got to start building that momentum and be in the position that they can capitalize off of any Couch Pepega mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we keep talking about the pedigree of Couch Pepega when they were buff or nerf rogue. They were at the global finals in Australia last year. They were at BlizzCon last year. This team, the members of the team that are on this team that were on buff or nerf rogue, they have a sort of like consistency. They have a pedigree. They have the experience in order to know how to make this kind of pull work. So I would imagine that if something similar happened to them here, they would know what the best case scenario would be for them as well. I would expect to see them pull off something similar, but still, it can't be undersaid how important that was for Self-Reliance early on.
Absolutely, and you know, being able to see Couch Pepega back in action is also one of the biggest things. We're not always shining the spotlight as bright as we should on the Asian region in particular, but Buff or Nerf Rogue and the Couch Pepega guys have absolutely had such a high pedigree, like you mentioned. And being able to see them back in the tournament, even though it's the second week, is just awesome to see.
Well, it's important to mention, right? Because we do this over the course of 3 cups, and we take the top 4 members based off of points from each region, even though they didn't qualify for the first cup, if they place well in both this and our 3rd cup, they could still easily make it into those top 4 spots for our finals later on in the year. So they're not out of it just yet, and they're playing well enough definitely to be one of our top 3, maybe even one of our top 2 teams in this tournament if they can continue playing consistently and continue putting up better and better times.
Yeah, and right now the 3rd through 6th teams right now in the European region are absolutely stacked as well, don't you think? Where each of them are just pressing to get to the spot that Method EU, Perplexed are at. And you know, we were seeing games being taken off the best of them at this point, and really just gonna be the sky's the limit.
Well, I think it's
complexity limit.
I think it's in both regions right now, right? Like we were a little bit concerned about the EUH region after the first cup, right? Where we kind of saw Method EU and Perplexed shooting out way ahead of every other team. Most of the other teams had consistency issues. They weren't they weren't always consistent in every single dungeon. But this weekend has really opened up the playing field a lot. We're seeing Pain for Finn playing really well. We're seeing Couch Pepega play really well. We're even seeing some of the other teams, the boys played really well in their last series, and they were top 4 last time around as well. This region is wide open right now. And even over in NA, the top 4 teams are all incredibly good teams, with the other 4 teams that qualified in the 5-3 position having pretty solid bases to work off of. I mean, I feel like this is the most competitive MDI scene we've had so far.
I absolutely agree. I mean, look at like the redemption this week for Deplete from Beyond as well, right?
Oh yeah,
they absolutely stepped up to another notch, another level that we've been wanting to see and kind of expecting to see from them as well. So that's going to be great to see more from them tomorrow. And like you mentioned, you know, the highs of the NA side is also really, really strong. So just seeing where these teams can grow, and just 2 weeks later, you see, wow. The people who are able to step up, the people who are using that practice time to the fullest, is ridiculous.
I mean, we're not even halfway through the MDS season left.
Exactly.
We still got 3 more cups after this for people to improve on their strategies and get better at and get more consistent. Maybe they have some new comps that they want to come up with as well for some of these dungeons. Like, this is the first time we've been seeing Triple Hunter, specifically because the affixes we have in some of these dungeons is just really playing to Hunter's strengths. We might see some more of that further on down the line. I mean, I could definitely see more comps coming out in certain affix combinations. Now, interesting change in strategy here I want to point out is Self-Reliance is going for this obelisk pull, whereas Couch Pepega did not go for it.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how teams are adjusting some of their obelisk attempts and obelisk pulls, and how much they're going to be able to handle different things like that. Because we've seen a number of times where, you know, one team goes with one less obelisk, and the team's going for three obelisks, and they're well practiced on it. It makes it look like it's nothing, right? So I'm always very interested to see how many obelisk teams are going to be bringing in with them. And Couch Pepega already engaging with Machimba the Embalmer in the second boss, while Self-Reliance is just now getting to its room with all the trash left.
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember, the typical strategy that we're seeing from most of the top end teams is they go for that 4 awaken pull, but I want to hold on for a second here. They've pulled all of the embalming. Is that all of the? I think they pulled all of the embalming fluids together, which is different from what we've seen from most teams. Most teams will pull half of the room, so all of the embalming fluids on one side of the room with that particular construct, and then they'll go to the other half and pull the other half of embalming fluids with one construct. This is different. This is a little bit more dangerous because you have to be a lot more even with your cleave. These embalming fluids, even though they have tiny little slivers of health, with the way bolstering works, those tiny little slivers of health could be up to 1,000,000 HP that you have to chew through. So they did a pretty good job of dealing with the bolstering there, but we'll have to see how they plan on dealing with the constructs. And it looks like Frodo's
they're
bringing the third one in, yeah.
He's going on a journey right now. Love the Transcend setup. He gets the quick Cracking Jade Lightning to, of course, grab the bridge construct and bring it in with the other 3. And that's what I was going to say, was that, all right, well, maybe they're going to add something else to the table because they're having just 2 constructs alone. And having just 2 constructs alone is not very efficient. That's why you're seeing, as you mentioned, Couch Pepega having embalming fluids on top of it. But being able to have the larger one and Majimba question mark?
I think they're going to have to reset it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I was like,
that's a mistake.
We're really past the times on this one.
Oh yeah, hey man, you want to bolster Majimba 3 times? Be my guest. But I don't think your tank's going to live through that one. Now they are going to have to actually focus down this purification construct unless they want to bolster it twice, which isn't going to be fun to tank that purification beam damage as we saw Harudra do there. But I mean, this is just going so much slower for them. We literally saw Couch Pepega go in one side dead, second side dead, and then just go straight to the boss. And Self-Reliance is kind of fumbling about here. Yeah, they're not really being as decisive with their movement. They're not being as efficient with their damage here. And Couch Pepega's already dealt with Majimba. They're moving on to the rest of the dungeon.
They are really absolutely doing a great job in this dungeon. And you know, King's Rest has been one of the most scary dungeons that we've seen out of the eastern region. But it was always buff or nerf rogue that had that level of consistency that we always love to enjoy. We always look to compare to the EU region. So now when they're going head to head with a lot of these European teams, even though they didn't have a great time trial run, they've been really making the best of it throughout the tournament. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, these guys have absolutely been playing great for where we thought they would be coming in as a 7 seed. Like, when's the last time you saw a 7 seed play this well? I can't think of ever. It's been a while. Actually, I don't think we've ever had a 7 seed play this well, unless it was a team that literally didn't try time trials, which honestly, these guys have been playing so well. I think they had to have not tried in time trials, otherwise they wouldn't be our 7 seed with the way they're playing. We are seeing them go for this double obelisk pull, so they're not going to have 4 obelisks on the final boss, but this is still something that's far more efficient than pulling that 1 obelisk mob, right? Definitely scary when you have to deal with all these adds, both the scarabs and the tendrils at the same time, but with the hunters you have so much free available cleave through multi-shot and the beast cleave that it's not something you worry about. The Reliance on the left-hand side, they did end up negating any boss mechanics, so they just get to full-on tunnel boss until they're able to kill it, so that'll be a nice burst of a single target they'll be able to add on to it. Seeing on the side of Couch Pepega, they're running away from any of the awakened mobs. They got pretty much all of the adds down there. They're just letting some of the last scarabs die and bolster any of their other allies. And now they're just getting themselves on to the council boss, to the penultimate boss's room, as they have 76% of the trash completed, and they're not going to really need much more after that. I guess they just fight their way back, kill Zool, and then they're set. Yeah, I mean, they're absolutely crushing this dungeon right now. No mistakes. They've been pretty damn clean in their bolstering management. They've been playing incredibly well. I mean, this is super impressive for a 7th. I mean, we keep calling them a 7th seed team. They're not. Yeah. They're not a 7th seed team. Honestly, like the way they're playing, they could easily be one of our top 4 seeds. I think that's part of where having such experience with MDI already has stepped up their advantage. Where they say, okay, we know that bracket's coming up soon. We know all the dungeons are being released soon. Here's how we're going to step up our schedule, and here's how we're going to be most prepared for it. And they've been doing that so far, right? Both the obelisks are dying. They did a really good job of knowing when to get out of that zone and when to get back in. They're going into Council of the Tribes right now, and they've got the Axe Lady Kula the Butcher to start us off. Yeah, and it's interesting to see that none of the hunters are playing dwarf for Couch Pepega. Usually we'll see all of the hunters play dwarf. I'm not sure why they've opted for that choice. The only real difference that makes in this dungeon is they won't be able to have that dwarf racial available to get off this axe barrage debuff from severing axe debuff from Kula the Butcher, but also they can just pre-turtle it if they have, good enough reaction times, reflex times,
to notice that the boss is targeting you and then hit turtle before it's applied, so you don't have to worry about that. And then of course also once Cool is dead, they're out of combat, they can feign death the debuff off because it removes them from combat, so it's not going to be that big of an issue. Also it's, you know, their healer should be able to heal through a debuff anyways, so I wouldn't worry about it in general. Oh, I got a full list of how they can deal with it. Let's go down the line.
You like started with like, oh yeah, this would be a cool thing, and you're like, cool thing, and you're like, also,
there's a lot of stuff
pull
they
out
can
the
do.
scroll. Well, you remember at LAN in Australia, they had the scrolls, right? The quests.
Oh yeah,
that
that's
they
right.
received for the top teams to get invited to BlizzCon.
Yeah, I stole one of those.
Just have like the, yeah.
No, I didn't.
Oh, I wish I had one.
I kind of wish I had one though. Those were cool.
Me too. Let's go do MDI together.
Hell yeah.
It's scrolls.
Let's do it.
All right. Second of the council going up right now for Couch Pepega at 75%. As we're seeing Self-Reliance 85%, but Furrow does go down. Looks like they're going to be needing a battle res. There's double bleeds going up onto Harudra at this point. I didn't quite glimpse where Furrow died, but it had to be up near the top of the stairs. I wonder if they're going to be able to get a quick res off on him and he'll be able to invis around or something. Because right now, as to where the Berserkers are standing, I don't think that... I'm pretty sure that they're standing almost right on top of where Furrow's at.
Yeah, if he is at the top of the stairs, that's going to be a problem. What they're going to have to do in that case is they'll have to have. It looks like Ashfeld will be able to go up and get him. If he wasn't able to, no, okay. This is what they're gonna have to pull it. He's gonna have to kite them around a bit. Harudra will be able to leap up and get the battle res off, and that'll be what they do. This is a huge time loss for them, though. This is not what you want to see at all.
Especially because they're going to have to find some way for Harudra and Furrow to get out. I mean, Furrow has Shadow Meld at his disposal, so he can get away, but we really need to make sure Harudra doesn't get in combat. They need to run away without pulling Kula the Butcher as well. They're going to try to get the reset off and just hope that they don't get noticed. Okay.
Okay, they're
out.
good, but that probably cost them about 30-45 seconds worth of time, which... It's gonna, I don't know, that's plus the deaths, right? So probably over a minute. That's not really what you want to see when you're already behind and your competitors are, you know, trucking along already on the final boss of the council. Like, it's rough to see.
Yeah, it really is. Self-Reliance not getting off to the best of starts just yet. Couch Pepega, however, as we mentioned, playing clean, playing efficiently, and they've really been putting on, you know, a great display of how hard their work, their persistence has been paying off for them. And I love being able to see these back-to-back feign deaths for any of the charges, any of the charge throughs onto this one, which makes the tank's life so much easier when you're not kiting all over the place. Yeah,
I mean, this is something that we saw pretty much pioneered in the Asian region last year, and really none of the Western teams picked up on it. You can call Ali the Conqueror has a very specific cast sequence. He will charge, and then he'll do the debilitating backhand, which if your tank is unable to block or dodge it, he'll have to kite around, because you don't want to get touched by that boss when you have that debuff. If you feign death enough of the charges off, he'll backhand anyways, and then he'll charge right afterwards, which means he's not meleeing your tank when the tank has the debuff, which means your tank can stay in to do full damage for the entire duration of the charge. It's just tiny little changes like that we saw over the course of the final season that these teams have picked up on. Small things like that saves you 5 seconds over the course of the dungeon, and these things are all over the place in the dungeon.
Yeah, it goes to show how important it is for these teams to have greater experience just running dungeons in general, to figure out all the little value that you can get from just knowing how these mobs are supposed to react and knowing how you can, I guess, sort of break them and make them start doing things that they otherwise would not be able to, because you're able to mess with the cast sequence and because you're able to game it, you know? Sometimes it works in your favor like this with Aka Ali. Other times you'll see out of Overseer Korgus where it goes the other direction and then it unlocks doubles all the time.
Yeah, and then your healer hates their life. But of course it doesn't matter because healers aren't really people anyways, according to most of our top end teams. So who really cares? Moving on. Moving on to the rest of the dungeon. Let's just blow right by that comment. Couch Pepega, they've already dealt with the trash they need at this point, right? They've got one last pack of 3 mobs that they have to deal with. They'll move on to Shadow Azul, and then the rest of their trash count will be in the form of those awakened mobs afterwards. Ching actually dropping low, 1% HP, and does end up going down. Now, they should be able to kite this out with the Ring of Peace before he gets back, so they shouldn't have any extra deaths on the board. That Poison Barrage going off might be a little scary. It is only on Elmo, though, so it shouldn't be that big of an issue, and it looks like he didn't really have to worry about the debuff anyways, so it's just going to be the 1 death on the board for them. But, I mean, other than these random small deaths that they've had, this run has been great for Couch Pepega.
I think that's the big takeaway is that the death counter doesn't always tell the full story onto it. You may say, oh yeah, well they didn't play that clean. They had a couple deaths. Or it's like, well, tank went down. We had hunters tank for us, and then we easily killed the pack. You know, a couple seconds slower here or there, right? Whereas you're seeing Self-Reliance, oh, we had a death on the healer, so we had to have one hunter drag all the mobs away while the warrior ran upstairs, use his engineering battle res. They both snuck past, and then you reset the mobs, right? It's just very, very different in how much time is being eaten up by each death here.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the sign of a team that really kind of knows how to minimize their losses, right? You can have both teams have a 10 death dungeon, but if team 1 had full team wipes 80% of the way into a pull, and team 2 just had 2 players die at the very end of every pull after everything was kind of dying off, those 10 deaths, even though it's 50 seconds on the board, are going to result in probably about 3 or 4 minutes extra time for the first team. So it's about when the deaths happen, and you're seeing a good example of that right here.
Most definitely. Couch Pepega getting ready to go into the final boss room. Perfect on trash percentage. They'll get the last 4% out of the obelisks. And right now, they've been absolutely stellar throughout King's Rest, and have showed a lot of poise as well to make sure that they're, you know, again, not over-bolstering. They're minimizing mistakes. We've got Samrak and I believe the caster as well that are about to be coming up.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I just want to point out how impressive this run is for Couch Pepega. Their time trial time was 25 minutes, about just under 25 minutes. These guys are on pace to have like a 23-minute run in competition with only 2 deaths. Like, this is a spectacular run for this team. As Shing drops low, scary moment from him, but they do only have 2 of those awakened mobs, so it's not like we're seeing a 4 awakened mob pull that we see from some of the higher end teams where the tank is pretty much in dire straits at every single point. And they're also bursting down that fear mob as well in the Beckoner Chaos, so that shouldn't be that big of an issue for them. Once that's dead, they're pretty much just onto the boss, because the hunters can deal with the Breaker of Heroes pretty easily, so the tank isn't really in danger anymore, and this should be smooth sailing for Couch Pepega on King Dazar.
Most definitely, and that's always one of the interesting things too when you look at it. You say, you know, simply, oh yeah, the hunters will just take care of it, but the work required, you know, to make sure that you're having a steady rotation, just like you would with an interrupt order of, all right, who's got a defensive for their pet, who's going to taunt Samrak this, or the Breaker this time, you know, rotating through that, and makes it miles easier for the group, as they're right now having Raban coming out, and they have plenty of things to cleave down.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you got to remember, optimal targets for rapid reload is 3, so once you have 3 targets out,
I was about to say.
Yeah, you get the aspect of the wild resets, you start really pumping the damage out because you have your cooldowns up all the time, and you get to it, and that's probably one of the reasons why they're keeping the Breaker Heroes alive, because it's not really that big of a damage output on your tank, right? And getting your cooldowns up is just super efficient.
Indeed. Self-Reliance here. They're going to be working on Shadow of Zul at the moment, around 30%, as Rudra is taking huge amounts of damage, as this is a very, very unfriendly boss, and certainly deserves its trash count, if not more.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
Can this give 10%?
yeah, it's bad. But fortunately, these Pro Warriors are tanky enough at mitigating damage that the blade combo with Awakened Mobs isn't something they really need to deal with, and should be none of an issue, right? Not for Shadow of Azul though. They're just yelling for heals for the entire time of Shadow of Azul.
I was gonna say, oh yeah, it's so nice that the tanks are so strong. You mean the healers, man?
Well,
healers helping them out.
Remember what we said right after the council, right? That still holds true.
Don't make me cry again. All right. 3 obelisks going up on the side of Self-Reliance as they're getting started with King Dazar, while Couch Pepega is at 38%, as they have dealt with Sala and are still cleaving down Raban. And they definitely, like you mentioned, took their time taking down the Tank Buster as well, so they were getting, extra cleave damage on top of that. And the optimization of the Couch Pepega has been very strong thus far. 23.5 minutes on the board. Might be getting almost exactly around their time trial time. Actually, probably a little bit less as well, 24 and a half, something like that.
Yeah, should be pretty low. I mean, it's not a blazing fast time compared to some of the King's Rest times we've seen, but of course you have to remember those low 21s, high 20s that we've been seeing from teams in competition this weekend are from teams that will go for the 4 Awakened Mob strategies. For 2 Awakened Mobs, I think what Couch Pepega is putting out here is a pretty solid time. They've even gone faster than this in previous MDIs. Now, of course, skilling was a little bit different back then, but okay,
we got Goomba
we're talking about the consistency, but a random death right at the end of the dungeon, you hate to see it. Hey, but Couch Pepega, they looked great in this first dungeon. You really have to hand it to them.
Didn't bother them one bit. Couch Pepega taking game number 1 on King's Rest. Good plays.
Yeah, good plays by them indeed. And, you know, you guys touched on it a lot during that game. Based on where they were seated, these guys are really playing out of their minds. And it makes me wonder, Tattles, what happened between this game that we're seeing today from Couch Pepega and those time trial runs.
I mean, they looked like they were going to get top 8 last Asia / European Cup, but they didn't post a junkyard time. So I also wonder what exactly happened with that, because this team is a very solid team overall. They definitely can capitalize on mistakes, not even from just teams like Self-Reliance, but they can absolutely capitalize on mistakes from teams like Perplex, like we saw earlier in the day, even Method EU. They have come to play, for sure.
Well, there's a little of it, tiny bit of insight, not necessarily anything too crazy, but you know, Supreme, who's somebody that I know pretty well, was a member of Buff Fortner for last year, and I asked him, because I'm kind of surprised, I expected him to see him play with his teammates again. I asked him, why aren't you playing this year? His response was, well, they really didn't want to go that hard on practice this time around, so I didn't really want to play. So that, maybe they just, I don't know, aren't really trying to play that much.
I think they
and then they changed their mind. That must be what it is, right? Because these guys look like they're incredibly well practiced.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think, I mean, you can't really, could you speculate that maybe they were like holding back in those time trials, or they just made some silly mistakes and they're like, yeah, we made top 8 anyways, you know, we'll just put all of our best foot forward in the actual competition?
I would never want to scuff time trials and face up against Method EU or Perplex in the first round. Never.
Yeah.
What I suspect is that they were probably like just not practiced enough, because they decided super late on that they wanted to go kind of hard, and so their time trials for a couple dungeons were just not as defined as well around the edges as they needed to be for them to not be a 7th seed. But then they probably go in and put in a little bit more practice. They improve their King's Rest by what is effectively a minute, which puts you in striking distance. Like, they're not going to just beat a team based on, like, they're not going to beat some insane team based on speed, but they are definitely in position to capitalize on a mistake. And improving by a minute means that they have gone in that dungeon more than what their time trial has shown since their time trial, and done a little bit different things.
I think it's probably part of the, we're not going to practice that hard, then they make top 8, and then they're like, never mind, let's practice really hard.
Well, it's important to mention as well that because they're a veteran team returning from the previous MDIs, it means they already have strategies in place for 9 of our current 11 dungeons, right? The only dungeons that wouldn't have pre-existing strategies for are the Mechagon dungeons. So they can work on top of those. And the player that they don't have returning from the last MDI is a DPS player. And let's be honest, the DPS slots in your MDI comp are probably the least important slots, right? As long as there's somebody who knows how to play their class properly and knows how to hit their crowd control abilities properly, you can just kind of say, hey, the blue mark is yours, you interrupt that and do your damage.
I think the healer would probably be the easiest.
What? Tattles?
I think the healer is the easiest to fucking play.
Don't hurt Jack like that.
I absolutely believe that many healers can press away at the crane and press spinning crane kick.
I'd love to see you try, Tattles.
I don't believe that I could, because I am not qualified. However, I believe that it is...
Not a qualified spinner?
Not a qualified Beyblade, no.
Now can they plug in a DPS and be the number 1 team? Probably not. Can you plug in a DPS and compete with some of the better teams if you're playing clean? I think so, right? They can be 90% efficient. You can still put up solid times. You're not going to compete with players like the Method EU players or the Method NA players where their efficiency is ridiculously high, like they're doing 99% of their output while playing perfectly. But you can still compete at the level that we're seeing them compete at right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a welcome surprise from Couch Pepega. So glad that they had that really awesome run, and it's super fun to see. But also, we don't want to count Self-Reliance out just yet. I mean, they had a pretty good run in the first cup. They managed to 2-0 Doppler effect, and then unfortunately got knocked out by the boys. But this is a very strong team as well. I mean, despite they had a couple of bad wipes, I guess, a couple of bad moments in that last game, you know, they may be able to tie it up here. What do you guys think?
I definitely think that they could tie it up, especially since Underrot, again, another one of the time trial maps. Personally, I don't want Self-Reliance to go too hard on themselves. I think that they have a lot of room for growth as a team and are just a little bit rough around the edges. They're a fairly green team in terms of just like MDI experience, and Ashvale, Mikkel, all fairly new to doing MDI style stuff. So they're kind of just trying to learn as they go. And I think as long as they take everything as like a way that they can improve, they would even be able to push forward even in other MDIs and in potentially week 3. It unfortunately takes a significant amount of time and a significant amount of practice to be able to get to the point where you are competing with these top tier teams, and Self-Reliance can be there. It takes time though, and that's the point I'm trying to make.
How much time did it take, Tittles?
Thanks, Tettles.
A lot.
Okay.
Do we know what kind of practice they're putting in Self-Reliance?
Nope.
Nope. All right. Well,
Nope.
I mean,
I could ask.
like you guys said, there is a lot of room for improvement for both of these teams, and I think it's something great to see so early, in the season of MDI. Like, some of these teams are really shaping up, and I think we have some really, really stacked teams here. And honestly, I'm excited for how we're going to see some of these teams sort of play out the rest of this season. We're seeing some really good performances coming out from all teams that we've seen today. But they're going to be going here into this next map, and they're going to be playing Underrot, and those affixes with that map are going to be fun.
A lot of Sanguine.
What?
A lot of Sanguine.
Well, yeah, it's going to be fun. We got Tyrannical, Skittish, and Sanguine. Jack, do you have a comment on that?
Don't heal the boss.
Don't heal the boss.
Yes.
And
I agree.
Good job.
Thank you.
Tettles, do you concur?
Sincerely.
Zyro, do you
All right.
concur?
Oh, I already said I agree.
Okay.
So
I
I will
concur
also
as well.
concur. Yeah, I will
How
also
much
concur.
more agreeable can he be?
Really getting along. We're really synergizing here on the fake deaths that we have set up. So really proud of us. Good effort. Don't heal the boss with the Sanguine. But these teams are going to be loading up soon here into Underrot. And what can we expect coming out of the gates in these first moments, Zyro?
It's tough to say, really. I mean, Sanguine really limits the size of pulls that you can do here. But this is also the dungeon where these two teams were closest together. Less than a 40-second difference in time trial time, so this is definitely going to be a good one to watch.
Yeah, for sure. And here they go. This is Self-Reliance versus Couch Pepega. They only need one more win to close this out.
No more bolstering. Sanguine is my new best friend as they get ourselves started in game 2. Large matron pulls on both sides right now to start us, Zyro.
Yeah, this is a similar pull that we're seeing from both teams. Now, they are both running the double DK Hunter comp, so they are going to be going for those massive pulls here. Pretty solid lack of healing for both teams. Good Sanguine management. A little bit extra damage needed on the Blood Matrons on the side of Couch Pepega, though, so not quite as good management for them. But it looks like the pulls are going to go down at the exact same time for them. Actually going down from Couch Pepega first, so I spoke too soon. They played that pull just ever so slightly better.
That's right. And they're already moving on to the next boss. We're seeing, Self-Reliance trying to skirt past all of the really heavy Sanguine puddles that are surrounding them. They made like a perfect circle with that as well. That was really cool to see.
Well, that's the cool thing about Sanguine, right? If your tank is doing his job properly, he leaves behind this giant trail of Sanguine blood if he's kiting properly. So you can kind of see that nice little visual aspect of them playing the game properly. But Couch Pepega is actually just continuing on and playing things just ever so slightly better throughout the entire dungeon so far. They did their trash mob skip past that pack on the bridge a lot more quickly than we saw from Self-Reliance, and you can see the difference. They're 30% ahead on the boss right now.
Yeah, and this is, again, that's a scenario when you have some of the best teams in the world competing with each other. Every little second counts as we go through it, and Couch Pepega already establishing a strong lead right now.
Yeah, but really, these differences are not going to be that big of an issue, right? When we're talking about Underrot, the way these teams are pulling it, especially on Tyrannical, it's all going to come down to that Kragmaw room, where these teams are doing these absolutely massive pulls. This is what the double Unholy DK is for. They will absolutely shred that pack, but at the same time, it's incredibly dangerous. There's going to be a lot of casts going out. There's going to be a lot of debuffs going out. There's going to be a lot of fixates going out, and if one team has a wipe there, that's pretty much going to spell the dungeon a loss for them.
One thing I always like doing is before we have those larger pulls is looking at any of the add-ons, or any of the CDs that we have underneath their frames, and seeing what kind of defensives they have at their disposal. I've seen a couple times where, somebody doesn't have their cooldown, or somebody doesn't use it at the right time, and just leads to those early deaths, and you pretty much need everything ready if you're going as big as we've seen other teams go in Underrot.
I mean, even last week, we saw Method and A going into this, they just pre-monk bubbled their tank. in order to make sure that he wouldn't instantly go down, just making sure they make these small little adjustments. So here we see both teams now setting up for the pull. Couch Pepega has pulled everything together, and Self-Reliance is just now setting up for the pull. We see Fixates go on 3 members of the group, so nice even damage across the group for that way. The Crane hailing from Loda. Hunter dropping incredibly low, but the DKs have already dealt their damage. Everything's dead. Just
And
insane.
the DKs didn't instantly burst, which means they didn't instantly grab aggro onto it. And we've seen that happen a couple times as well.
Yeah, but while we're talking about that, the Sanguine management from Self-Reliance has been absolutely perfect. The trash pull is already dead for them while we're still having some lingering mobs on the side of Couch Pepega. So even though Couch Pepega probably pulled that trash about 10-15 seconds earlier, they're ending the pull behind Self-Reliance. Self-Reliance has absolutely brought themselves back in this dungeon at this point.
And looks like they're going into the exact same position as both of them are going into the obelisk right now. Somebody was studying the same tests, notes, and everything right now. As Tank Breaker is going up, they're just going to kill it really quickly. And you think they're both going into the boss after this?
More than likely, I think that's what they'll end up doing here. Everyone's cooldowns will be reset at that point, and they'll probably also pull in one skeleton pack like we see more teams usually do as well. One thing to mention, it looks like Couch Pepega did get a couple extra mobs into that first AoE pull, as they do have 3% more trash on the board, so that might have been why their Sanguine management and thus their pull was a little bit less perfect. So Self-Reliance will have more mobs in this secondary pull that they end up pulling into Kragma, which means there'll be more opportunities for their Sanguine to be mismanaged, more opportunities for the boss to heal. So we'll have to keep an eye on that as Urgroth Breaker of Heroes goes down within 2 or 3 seconds for both teams, and they will gear up for this big pull into Kragma.
Here we go, just trying to see how large of a pull that each of these guys is going to be going for right now as they grab some of the skeletons. Both teams, again, in lockstep with each other. You ever play any of those racing games where you just like ran a time trial, and as you're going on like the next track, you started seeing like the shadow of the previous, go-kart or race that you were in? This is like the exact same thing. We're seeing, again, bosses being pulled in on both sides. We saw Anda go down on Self-Reliance, but quickly got battle-rezzed up. And now it's just to see who's going to avoid the heals.
Oh, no. And literally the same thing happening as well. But unfortunately, deaths on the side of the board for Self-Reliance, as Mikkel now also goes down, and they don't have a battle res available for him because they just used it on Anda. So if they do end up trying to kill this boss, they're going to have to do it with a DPS down from 80% to 0. But the same thing is now happening on the side of Couch Pepega. 2 DPS have gone down, and they're probably going to go for a boss reset and not commit to using the battle res here.
Yeah, and it's still very scary. I mean, they've got just the double Bloodstormers. I wasn't sure how much extra trash they'd have, so definitely resetting the boss there, getting these down is going to be the right play. Try not to risk it too much, but that Bloodstormer's really big, so they do opt to use that extra battle res. But on the side of Self-Reliance, they're still kiting out these mobs right now as Rudra is extraordinarily low. Resetting the boss on their side might also be the play.
Yeah, they did end up resetting the boss, and they are going to finish off this trash pack with just the 2 DPS alive. So actually, essentially the exact same thing happening for both teams. Finishing the trash pack at the exact same time. Literally what you were saying is happening again. We're seeing the ghost of one team being followed by the ghost of the other team. These guys are neck and neck, same trash count, pulling the boss It'll probably be about 15 seconds because of the res timer afterwards. But man, wipes at the same point, resetting the boss at the same point, committing the same amount of battle reses, having to res their teammate afterwards. It's just all the same. Same deaths on the board too. 2 deaths for both teams. It's neck and neck. It's not clean, but it's still neck and neck.
Why are these Underrot games are always so good lately?
Oh, they're great. I love it. I love it. It's just, and the crazy thing is such a volatile dungeon and how they pull it, right? These pulls are massive. Usually when we see wipes, we see full team wipes, but somehow all day today, we see teams somehow able to claw their way back into making it more of like a trickle down wipe where a couple people die and they kind of pull everything back together and they manage to get themselves back into it. It's good to see a bunch of different teams being able to pull off these sort of pseudo wipes where they're able to recover just a little bit to where they can finish off the trash and not actually have a full team wipe.
I think part of that's also credit to like the defensive strength of tanks these days. As essences grow and develop, gear gets better as well. Being able to stabilize themselves just long enough to make that decision of, okay, do we reset or am I kiting like crazy here? Do I need to be able to make space? We've seen a lot of times, I think, in previous seasons where if you didn't kill the pack in time, your tank is just dead and you completely wipe and that's over.
Yeah, we do have to keep an eye on the side of Couch Pepega here, where they have had some blood tick spawns. There will be a little bit of extra damage out on the group. Need to make sure they're being careful in spawning those. But man, I mean, look at the boss percentages here. Even though Couch Pepega pulled 10-15 seconds earlier, Self-Reliance has consistently been within 5 or 6% of them, even as low as 1 or 2%. So these guys are literally neck and neck, even after both having that weird pseudo wipe. This is ridiculous.
That's right, almost equal in terms of percentage on boss right now, as Kragmaw is having another tantrum. See, it's again 3-4 seconds difference each time.
Oh yeah,
it's scary. Like the names are the same, right? Okay, I see Mikkel on the right. I see Elmo on the left. Okay.
Yep, they're
Perfect.
exactly the same.
Like,
it's the same players.
I would just want to make sure, okay? Because if we could just get the same feed going right now, and there's like a 4 or 5 second delay, I've been like, oh.
Are the Zerpos observing the same game? Are we actually seeing both feeds here? I mean, look at the damage meters too. Hunter's on top of both damage meters by a solid amount. Now it is 20k on the right side and like 35k on the left side, but still, I mean, that's kind of just what happens with Unholy DK on single target when you don't have Army of the Dead available and you don't have a bunch of Festermite targets in order to stack up your strength. This is kind of what they do, which is why you see teams kind of lean into that strength where they can do mass AoE on top of bosses, get that exponential scaling in.
That's right. So really, now that the board has kind of been wiped clean, as they're fairly neck and neck at this point, it's really going to be how does Sport Caller Xantra go, right? As you start looking at the next pull that's going to be set up here, they again expect to have traps going up on the Grotesque Horror for both of them, eerily similar as they grab the skeleton packs and probably do themselves set up to start running towards Sport Caller Xantra. And
I love how that's just like the strat now is for teams to pull one of those Feral Bloodswarmers off to the side.
So random.
It's random, but they need that particular exact amount of mob count, right? I love how all of the teams have figured out this is the best strategy just independently of themselves and not necessarily just all yoinked one strategy at the same time. They all figured out, hey, we need 2% mob count here. That's going to be what we pull. Because in past seasons, Feral Bloodswarmers are the most difficult mob, but I got to hold on for a second here as Loda goes down for Couch Pepega. They don't have a battle res available for him as well, and they kind of need that monk alive because they haven't cleared any of the mushrooms, and they need the revival in order to remove the debuffs when the boss does is cast at 100% energy. They're going to have to reset the boss here, which is going to be a massive time loss for them.
Yeah, and they're hoping they got, 10 seconds left or something like that until they can get the battle res. Ching also does go down because they weren't able to reset the boss in time. They might be able to get the reset at the last possible second, but if he goes down, everyone's running back. Oh, and you see the releases start coming up. Everyone's going to have to run back. They have one solitary skeleton that they have to get. Self-Reliance is back into the driver's seat.
Oh yeah, Self-Reliance is back at it, and they are firmly in the lead now, as now Couch Pepega has to run back through the entire instance at this point. But the thing to remember here is, even if Couch Pepega goes down in this dungeon, we are going to go to a game 3. It's going to be on that Atal'Dazar that we saw them take a game off of Perplex earlier on. So if you're Couch Pepega here, you still have to keep playing this dungeon out. You have to keep your spirits up. You have to, be happy with where you are, and it looks like Ching has not completely dropped combat here, so okay, we do see the Shadow Melt come out from him just there. That was weird though. He was still in combat with the trash pack that they scared. It was casting that Harrowing Despair on him.
Oh, and now they're gonna have to res twice.
Yeah, they're gonna have to re-res now, which is unfortunate.
If you look at it, they just had the death there. They're gonna have to wait for everybody to get back. And they're gonna have to wait for another Shadow Meld. They're just gonna have to kill this. There's no they don't have Shadow Meld.
They don't have any ways to get past this. So I feel like if you're them, we talk about this a lot. You can see the YouTube feed. You can see the stream. You probably know you're behind at this point if Self-Reliance continues to play clean for the rest of the dungeon. So at this point, you have to think mentally. Okay, we're gonna have to go into the next dungeon more than likely, right? Unless something massively crazy happens with Self-Reliance and they have two or three full team wipes, especially on the Unbound Abomination, that could bring them back in. You have to think, okay, let's get in the mindset of what we're going to do in Atal'Dazar, right? We know we have a good strategy there. We know we have a good comp. Let's keep a healthy mindset. Let's keep playing as if we had a chance in this dungeon and make sure that we're of clear conscience moving on.
I think that's really the time where you start kind of pushing to raise everybody else's spirits and, remind them of the fact that the Couch Pepega is able to perform at an extremely high level on Atal'Dazar, right? Start looking forward to it. And Self-Reliance is also your way back in. This is a way to kind of reignite everybody's, excitement about MDI and reignite everybody's hope that they can still continue to advance and they can still continue to really shine throughout this tournament as well. Because I think after placing worse in the time trials, I think after the struggles they've had today, it's been rough, and you kind of need that extra jolt to get people motivated.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think about where their mindset is. It's a big thing, right? They were the 3 seed in our first EU Cup 2 weeks ago. They're the 6th seed this time around. They essentially swapped positions with Deplete from Beyond. Faced up against them this time around and ended up losing to them in the first time this time around. That's got to be a real heartbreaker, knowing that you kind of suffered that loss that you didn't have to deal with in the first cup. So being able to take this win and get back into a game 3 after getting pretty decisively beaten in the first series, that's got to help your mentality out.
It really should help it out as the last bits of trash are being taken down by Self-Reliance, although they don't have 100% off of this, do they? They need to actually pull one of the tentacles.
Yeah.
They have to go all the way downstairs. Yep, so Harudra goes in, grabs one of our spaghetti noodles, and gets themselves ready just to burn that down very quickly, and again, gets it away. I was about to say gets it away from the Sanguine onto it, but then they gripped it right on top.
We haven't really had that many opportunities in this season of the MDI to call those by their proper names. Danger Noodles, Hazard Spaghettis. Right. It's just not part of the typical pulling route anymore, unfortunately. We used to see teams pull trash on top of that and cleave it down, but now they just pull it on top of bosses. They're just poor neglected noodles now.
So degenerate now. It's the wholesome days of the noodles.
I miss the noodles, man.
All right, last boss coming up on the side of Self-Reliance is they have to deal with 2 question mark obelisks.
I believe 3. Should be 3.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Yep. There's the 3rd. 3 obelisks up on the side of Self-Reliance. Bloodlust has been popped. Everything is going up. Blood of the Corruptor, plus Caster, and Fear coming all in at once. I think people are usually going for the Fear first, right?
Yeah, Fear is usually what they'll do with first here because they have plenty of kicks for the Void Weaver, and then of course for the Blood of the Corruptor, it's probably going to be the second mob they cleave down. Whereas the Fears, you only have a certain amount of cooldowns that you can use to nullify that Fear circle until you run out and everyone actually starts getting feared, which is awful. So we're probably going to see them go for the Blood of the Corruptor second here once the Fear mob is down, and then they'll just slowly off-kick the mouth here. But they kind of just destroyed everything altogether anyways.
I don't think anybody actually ended up getting feared. They had the Revival for first, they had Warrior plus the DK's AMS for second, and then I think it was just gone at that point. They've done an incredibly good job of destroying all these Awakened mobs very quickly, and again, that's what you need, and that's what we've been really expecting out of a lot of these higher teams, is being able to put a lot of pressure on your group to pretty much go all in at the very end, and they make it look easy. Yeah,
and I think it's actually interesting to talk about this, because I remember whenever we had the Keystone Masters over a month ago, and that was on a 7-team key, I believe. Teams were kind of scared to pull 3 or 4 Awakened mobs on that level, and the thought of going up to 19 and also pulling 3 or 4 Awakened mobs on the 19 scenario was scary to some teams. But these teams are really they've flushed it out. They've gotten used to it. It's impressive to see 4 Awakened mobs being pulled and dealt with on a pretty consistent basis in a lot of these dungeons. It's not something that's easy by any stretch of the imagination, but they're really pulling it off.
They have been, and right now, Self-Reliance riding high as they're, about halfway through the boss at the moment and have to just burn through the energy bar 2 times more before they're able to claim the win of the dungeon. We see Elmo going down on the side of Couch Pepega. They have 1 battle res left remaining, but at this point, looks like they don't want to waste too much time. They do get the res up and they get rolling, but Loda is also dropping low. I mean, we've seen just extra smacks from any of the Abyssal casts coming out really quickly, and people just not being able to move because they're surrounding themselves around that noodle and just making it more difficult to be able to DPS.
But at this point, it's way too little too late, as the 3rd set of Blood Visages has already spawned for Self-Reliance. They absolutely trashed this boss. It got deleted. And as the Unbound Abomination goes down, Self-Reliance is going to take Game 2 of the series and send us to a tiebreaker Game 3 for our last dungeon of the day.
Yeah, we are now all tied up here. It is 1-1. Really an impressive feat for Self-Reliance there. They really tackled that last boss with those 3 obelisks Tuttles in the last moment there.
Holy moly, we have had so many Game 3s today.
Yeah.
Only fitting that this one is about to go to Atal'Dazar, which we saw Couch Pepega route Perplexed on. It'll definitely be a feat to see. Self-Reliance looked pretty good in that Underrot, even though they had some minor issues on Kragmaw. Their time trial time for Underrot was 14:07. Their run in that dungeon 16:02. So yeah, about 2 minutes worth of I need to reset this boss, I'm kind of scared moments. I'll accept that with how big they were pulling. So overall, both Couch Pepega and Self-Reliance, they don't look perfect, but they both look like they, if they can shore up some of their weaknesses and become a little bit more sturdy around the edges, they could absolutely compete with some of the top tier teams. They just need to make sure that they are continuing to become more and more consistent week over week.
Yeah, definitely. And considering that Couch Pepega had a pretty clean first run, it's definitely unfortunate to see them sort of fall apart there in Underrot with those numerous wipes, Zyro.
Yeah, it's you kind of hate to see it, but at some point you kind of have to realize with the amount of wipes that you're having, we talked about this in the dungeon as well, that you just kind of need to pull it together, get in a good attitude, leave it behind you, and move on. And hopefully they can do that here. We know that they have a good strategy in Atal'Dazar. We know they have a good time in Atal'Dazar. You have to remember that time that they had earlier today, that was with a mistake. They let a totem heal on Volkal. They could probably go about 30 seconds faster.
Very true.
So I'd like to see them
What
be
was their
able.
time on that?
I believe. Let me check our spreadsheet we have here. It was a 14:07, which is a pretty fast time in Atal'Dazar, even with that mistake. So
With that,
they can definitely go fast in this dungeon.
yeah, well, we'll have to see for that next matchup who goes home with the victory. Tettles, you had a replay for us on that last game.
Yes, ultimately the replay does not look good for either team, I will admit.
Come on, man.
Unfortunately, both of these teams are neck and neck, but I do expect more out of both of these teams, and I believe that they can deliver, especially in a dungeon like Atal'Dazar. Underrot is such a knife's edge dungeon. Pulling that many feral bloodswarmers, you're just bound to have somebody go down eventually. Unfortunately, both of the teams had wipes whenever they ended up pulling all of those bloodswarmers into Kragmaw. It's not unfortunately uncommon. Couch Pepega then had another issue going into Sporecaller Xantia. I felt like I was having like a deja vu moment. It was like watching the exact same run twice as Jack and Zyro were joking about, oh, do we have observers in only one match? I was like, oh, yes, I see what they're talking about. But then I think Loda ended up going down on Xantia, and that was just the end of the run for Couch Pepega, unfortunately. Self-Reliance made sure they were very clean on Unbound Abomination, plus the Obelisk mobs with that really showed off how they are able to execute that well, and ended up taking the match.
Yep. Yeah, and you know what else I realized during this is Couch Pepega, I'm pretty sure they're an all-Taiwanese team. It's like 9 a.m. for them.
It is, but it's also incredibly late over in Europe right now. It's probably 2 a.m. for the guys at Self-Reliance.
Yeah.
So
and
both of these guys
at the
are...
end of the day, both of these
Yeah.
teams are probably dealing with quite a bit of fatigue at this point in time, Jack.
Okay, so according to the Googler, time in Taiwan is 9:28 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's crazy how that works.
Nice.
Yeah. They must have started at like 1 a.m. I don't know what the regular hours are, but still, I mean, both of these teams, this is the last match of the day. This is the 8th match. Especially, you know, for both of these teams, they've had quite a bit of matches between this current match. What is sort of sitting around and maybe not staying fresh on your toes due to a team here, Zyro?
Well, it's weird, right? Because the way that I always viewed it when I was in competition, I never got to the point where I was like tired, right? I was always completely wired because I was amped up to participate in the competition. And it wouldn't surprise me if it's similar for a lot of these players too, because these guys have been doing it for a long time. Competition kind of, I mean, you wouldn't do it if you didn't love it, right? So I don't really think that's too much of a factor here. It might be, but I don't know. I don't think it really is as big of a deal as we're making it out to be.
Yeah, definitely, and it just goes to show how dedicated a lot of these teams are, and they really, really want to see that victory, as this is an elimination round, and there's only one game left in the series to see who's going to be knocked out of the tournament and who will get to continue on in this lower bracket here. I couldn't even make a prediction at this point. I mean, these teams were, as you guys were joking around, like neck and neck during this last game, Tettles.
I expect... Okay, do you want us to give a prediction?
Only if you feel like it.
I bet that Self-Reliance will win. I bet Couch Pepega ends up wiping to something. I bet Couch Pepega ends up wiping to one of their snaps after... Okay,
You
the
can't
snap
say
involving...
that. That's a caster
Okay.
curse.
That is a caster
I bet
curse.
Couch Pepega ends up wiping to their snap involving the middle pack after Razan. And
Okay.
I bet Self-Reliance takes the game.
At what time in the dungeon is that going to happen?
Over or under?
8:30.
Okay, so if history is to go by here, the opposite team is going to have a wipe 1 minute later into the dungeon than what Tettles just said.
Yep.
Because that's exactly what happened in
it.
Siege of Borealis. So
Flip it here.
you heard it here first. Tettles
You heard
has
it
predicted
here.
that Self-Reliance is going to have a wipe at 9 minutes and 30 seconds into the dungeon by proxy.
Oh god. No caster curse, bro.
Well, it's weird because we can see the comps on our screen with our feeds. when we're seeing that Self-Reliance is running a comp similar to what we saw from Perplexed earlier today. They're running the double DK Demon Hunter comp instead of the double DK Hunter comp that we know Couch Pepega likes to run. And this might end up having a similar problem that we saw with Perplexed. They don't have a misdirector or Tricks of the Trade in order to snap mobs to the tank, so that means the tank has to do everything by himself. And if there's any preliminary aggro taken by either proxy healing or by DPS going too early, the snap will be ruined and we'll see a wipe again.
That's what lost Perplex the match, is that Swag just ripped Threat off Divine as soon as the mobs got into the snap, because it's like a multi-step process where the tank, Harudra in this case, will be grouping all the mobs himself and will not have any external assistance like Ching and Az are doing to one another.
Yeah, and the affixes that we're going to be seeing with this, as we saw earlier today, are also Fortified, Skittish, and Bursting, and it looks like the gates are about to open. We are tied up. This is the last game of the day, you guys. They will be knocked out of the tournament, loser of this round. Self-Reliance versus Couch Pepega.
You know, of all the dungeons that have, that we could be casting Zyro, I'm still kind of scarred the last time I went into a Bursting dungeon with you. Your games of, let's see how long we can extend Bursting are, still leave me hurt inside.
Wait, I thought you liked that because it made you look good on stream because you did so much HPS.
I don't want to heal. I want to spin.
Oh.
I want to spin.
Oh, my bad.
It's okay, buddy.
All right, they're crushing it already right away.
Don't extend.
Oh, they're extending. They're extending.
Zyro, why?
How have they not died?
Oh my
That's
goodness.
Impressive. Wow, didn't die to the extend. Already right away, differences in pulls coming out from the teams. So Self-Reliance opting for a much smaller pull and just going for the flat extends, where the Bloodlust is popped for Couch Pepega, and they've opted to just go for the entire room. 13 extra percentage of trash on the board.
That's right. Did they have deaths and we just missed it onto that one?
I guess we missed it.
I didn't see either of them.
I didn't either.
That one, but okay, sure. I'm going to say that we did. Or an observer died as well. One or the other. But we are seeing Awakened mobs going in right now, as does it look like Couch Pepega is kind of holding their ground. Okay, now they're starting to get some movement going onto this one. I was wondering how long they'd be waiting, or if they'd start running up really quickly and trying to get a quick snap onto onto the caster to reposition it more easily.
Yeah, it doesn't look like either of the teams is going to go for a snap here, or definitely not Self-Reliance, as they're already at the top of the stairs and they're setting up for their positioning to get it in position. Yeah, they won't have to worry about any sort of snapping here with it being right in front of that pillar. Couch Pepega spoke too soon. They went for the snap onto the Brazier like we saw just there. They'll be able to pull it into the boss and get nice in position to go into Priestess Alunza, but it's going to be Self-Reliance pulling the boss first. Now, of course, they did pull less trash. They're 11% down, so we're going to have to see where that comes from later on. But I'm not really sure where you're going to make that up in terms of efficient trash count, right? Because we know from the polls earlier today, Couch Pepega will be pulling that middle pack of the Dinomancer and his dinosaurs, which is probably the most efficient trash to pull in the instance. So I'm just wondering where that extra trash percentage is going to come from for Self-Reliance.
I think they're going to go... I guess it's a good point. I mean, you can only grab so many Sky Screamers off to the side, off to the edges. Furrow's really got to dispel himself on here because he's been sitting with that debuff for such a long period of time. A lot of his mana has been burned through at this point, but they're getting themselves ready for the first of the draw-ins. Priestess Alunza has just been absolutely tanking in HP on the side of Self-Reliance, down to 30% right now. Yeah,
we just now see the first transfusion coming out for Couch Pepega, but Elmo has gone down, which means that their transfusion didn't get the maximum amount of damage on Priestess Alunza, so they're actually going to have to put in some legwork, make sure that Alunza gets down into that 25 to 30% range so it'll actually die during the next transfusion. And then on top of that, they no longer have that battle res available for the rest of the dungeon, which is, not quite what you want to see in Priestess Alunza, which is typically one of the more easier bosses to deal with in terms of the overall MDI.
That's right, last percent's dying right now for Self-Reliance as they are pulling through, and again, like you mentioned, still a really big trash differential up onto this one at the moment. And as you mentioned, it's kind of weird not seeing any of the not the obelisks, the titans, the giants that we saw previously out of Couch Pepega, and it makes you kind of look at what else they're going to be going, I guess, into the undead wing to try to get a bit of trash percentage, but it's always disgusting having to pull any of those honor guards. But Furrow goes down. I believe he went down to one of the strikes from one of the mobs there, since the tank was running into position to snap everything. Yeah. They get him out very quickly, but again, can't be risking any of these extra deaths.
Yeah, fortunately, that's not going to be a team wipe, right? Just your healer going down is like, oh wow.
Couch Pepega, however, is
they messed up their snap completely. They just completely messed up their step. Full team wipe for them, even though they have the misdirect available. That's going to be an extra 25 seconds on the board. That's going to be a huge loss from them. Self-Reliance not pulling the snapped pack into the boss, which is losing them time, but not wiping saves you a lot more time than that for sure.
Most definitely is. It does look like.
Now, what are they doing? Are they waiting for their healer to run back now? Is that what they're doing?
I believe so, yeah. So maybe they're going into that other phase, rezzing them, and that way they get brought back into the other one, I guess.
Huh.
I have to get a look at where Lotus at to be able to see it. But Self-Reliance pulling Razan right now is down to 70%, and Pepega is just kind of stuck in the mud at the moment.
Yeah, they have to wait for their healer to run back to get the res off, because what needs to happen, right? They need to res their tank at the top. Their tank can do the initial snap, and then the tank might have to like jump off, get the misdirect from the hunter, and then get snapped to the boss, which is a very weird set of events, but it could definitely happen. You might not even have to jump off. As long as the hunter has line of sight to misdirect, they can still pull off this pull. But I mean, that's just a huge time loss in them. They've waited over a minute to reset this pull up at this point.
They're going to try to be able to bring this back at this point, but right now you are seeing, again, they're getting themselves reset once again. Looks like they're going to be grabbing the snap spot to start, then grabbing Razan, getting Qingbibi up onto it, but it doesn't actually properly snap the tank under the boss, and the DPS starts going down. There's both Death Knights and Xing soon to follow.
It looks like there was a miscommunication there. It looks like it looks like Tomboy thought, or Tombao rather, thought that they were going to go for the hunter snap to Razan, and he instantly targeted the boss. But Xing looked like he was going for the more normal strategy that we see from non-misdirect groups pull, where he just jumped down for the snap and didn't quite get to the boss in time because the snap didn't work properly. So just miscommunication there, causing another full team wipe for Couch Pepega. And at this point, you have to wonder, are they going to keep going for this pull? I mean, it's already cost them 10 deaths on the board, as well as 3 minutes behind. And Self-Reliance has already dealt with Razan. He's dead for them. They're probably a full 2 or 3 minutes ahead at this point because of this.
And they're completely caught up on trash as well. There's no advantage on the side of Couch Pepega, and those wipes just keep on compounding, and it doesn't really seem like they have any kind of good plan B as to resolve whatever issues that they had. You know, they're trying to just scramble and put something together, right? But as you're seeing, they're trying to get another snap pull together, but everybody's insanely low. Nobody's in position to be able to get healed. Way the crane hasn't been going up. He's going to try to get it together, but again, more deaths coming up, and Couch Pepega compounding on their issues.
I mean, again, a snap gone wrong. It didn't snap into the right place at first. A fear cast went off. The entire group was feared. Loda was unable to heal the group. And yeah, just another full team wipe from improper snapping, unfortunately, from Couch Pepega. This is just kind of, you see so often how snapping is supposed to go, and everyone says, well, that looks kind of easy. Why doesn't everyone do that all the time? Well, you're getting a nice little lesson in what can possibly go wrong with this particular strategy right here. It's really unfortunate to see it all happening at the same time for one team, but that's the name of the game. That's how it goes sometimes.
Indeed. Couch Pepega pulling into Razan. Self-Reliance is just working on some of the trash that they can, I guess, potentially deal with the Obelisk. I think they have to deal with the Fear Mob at this point. I think they could just bring that in with the boss, so I guess they're just going to run after this, ditch the honor guard, and go straight into the boss, or... Okay, there we go.
Yeah, there you go.
They're grabbing everything.
Here goes the double DK burst now. Look at him go.
Here's where they start making up a lot of the lost trash percentage that they did by not pulling any of the golems earlier. Found the name for it, thank you. And right now, 70% up on trash and quickly exploding as they gotta watch the bursting stacks as Ruja's dropping low, but Cocoon almost getting completely consumed in just one tick.
Everyone dropping to below 20%. Nashville going down, actually. The Demon Hunter dying first. The hero class went down and everyone else stayed alive? What's going on there? That class isn't supposed to die.
Little ability called Netherwalk, excuse me.
Never walk after you go down, I guess. Unfortunate. But this is not a typical strategy. Pulling the Beckoner of Chaos like this, usually we'll see teams just focus it down with the final boss of the dungeon, and just this is, if Couch Pepega had a clean pull, they would have definitely won this dungeon, looking at the way that Self-Reliance is pulling right now.
That's always the interesting thing about MDI is the what-if scenarios of,
right.
If you watch both of these teams do the dungeons 5 times, who would have the best average? Who would have the best single run? Something along those lines, right? And looking at once one thing goes wrong, Couch Pepega really just fell apart. Like you said, miscommunication into just random chaos happening, healer getting feared, healer going down, and Pool's just completely falling apart.
Wait a minute. I think Tettles ended up being right. I think Couch Pepega wiped
Well,
at 8 minutes on the middle pack.
They made it 8 minutes with all the deaths that were
Oh,
added
yeah,
to the time.
true. You gotta
Does that
remember.
still count?
Nah, because it's Tettles now.
Exactly.
All right. It's all good then.
That's what I thought.
Couch Pepega has
right.
killed Razan, so they do have that down. Now they're going to go for the snap pull once again, not including the center pack this time, going for a smaller snap pull. But Loda's dropping low again. Really needs to get himself healed up here, and he's not looking like he's popping any major cooldowns here. It just has to heal through it. This is scary. That Toxic Sword is still not snapped. It's going to be jumping on people in the group.
And he also used Diffuse Magic extremely early. It's going to fall off in just a second. He's going to take a couple big hits, but it's just enough to survive. He used it extremely early. I think he might have just slammed all of his defensives at once when he was worried about getting jumped on, but Diffuse wasn't doing anything for the physical damage of the Saurids on him. But they were able to survive, but just barely, and like you said, now they have a middle pack to deal with and very limited in the cooldown department.
Yeah, that's for sure. It doesn't. I don't think that Loda. He's still. Yeah, I see he has the Way of the Crane available there, so they probably are going to be able to use that for most of the healing here. Are they going to pull that middle pack on top of this and snap it though? They haven't done it yet, so I'd be surprised if they would do it at this point, this late into the pull. Yeah,
The Way of the Crane's already gone up at this moment right now, so they're fine to just muscle heal through this kind of attempt. If they have Way of the Crane rolling, but after that, they're probably going to be missing out on quite a few CDs, and you're just seeing some of the defensives start coming back. Apocalypse is up for Tomboy, but not up for Elmo, for example.
Yep.
So they just got a weird smattering of cooldowns at their disposal, and it's like we've talked about before, when you just don't have all your cooldowns aligned, there's just chaos.
I mean, they're not even opting to snap this pull of swords. I mean, that's just, they're just kind of barreling headlong into the dungeon at this point. They're throwing caution to the wind and pulling whatever they can at this point, right? That's what you kind of have to do. Their entire route is messed up at this point, right? They're just going wherever they feel like they can pull. It's not really what you want to see. Now, there's still a lot of chances for Self-Reliance to make mistakes because of how difficult Yasma is with Awakened mobs, but I feel like they've removed the most dangerous one in the form of that Beckoner of Chaos, the Fear mob. So the chances of them actually having any issues on the final boss, no caster curse, is pretty low.
Knock on wood there. They do. Couch Pepega does end up going for the middle pull right as we speak, and they're grabbing everything in together. Gotta watch for. Okay, I thought somebody almost fell off. We've seen that too many times in Atal'Dazar where somebody gets up onto that snap spot and just falls right off immediately. Thankfully, it did not happen.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to be careful here, right? All of these classes are pet classes, and essentially a lot of the damage comes from pets, and even for the DKs, a lot of the bursting swords and a lot of their extra damage does come from that pet transform that they do as well. So you kind of have to position yourself in those precarious situations in order to get maximum DPS out, and that's why we're seeing them just coming that close to falling off. Now, they do unsnap at the last moment here because they do have to end up pulling more trash. They're going to resnap with more mobs just for some extra added efficiency, and I don't know, this looks pretty cool, but it's definitely not the best thing to do by any stretch of the imagination.
Of course, and at this point they're just trying to be able to put together any sort of combination of cooldowns. Because I mean, what do you do at that point when you just say, all right, well, we don't have everything that we were previously planning for. We don't have all these resources at our disposal. We just got to kind of grab whatever we can and go. And you are seeing Harujo drop very low on the side of Self-Reliance, but Darkness is down. Tons of healing out of that, almost 2 million from Darkness alone.
Whew.
Stabilized
Hero class.
It is a hero class.
Gotta love that.
Hero. Loda going down on the side of Couch Pepega as they still have not killed the rest of this middle trash pack, and Tomboy drops down to the Razan floor. This is a nightmare for Couch Pepega.
I mean, yeah, this is rough to watch. I mean, they're kind of falling apart at this point, which it sucks to see because Couch Pepega, I mean, we've been talking about them all day, right? They're a 7th seed who really is not playing like a 7th seed. They probably should have been our 4th or 5th seed if they'd actually played to this point, in the time trials, which means they probably would have had a better chance to win their first matchup of the day. They matched up against Perplex, which is one of the better teams in this region. So it's rough to see, but hopefully we'll see them come back next time around should they go on to lose this dungeon and have a good showing in our 3rd cup.
That's right, and it's, even though, like we said, it's a delay in being able to see them, it's been a pleasure to start seeing so many of these teams come back, start playing, start showing how competitive they really can be, and it's tough because the European region has been so stacked lately, and Self-Reliance pulling Yasma right now, grabbing in all of the obelisks that they can, and looking to be able to seal this victory so that they can continue on until tomorrow.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's all going to come down to this for Self-Reliance, but I think at this point they could also just have a wipe and still have time.
No, jinx.
No, you know what?
No
They
jinx.
could wipe and still win this dungeon because of how far ahead they are. I'm going to say it. I don't care if I cast or curse them because they only have 2 awakened mobs on top of them. They have the Bloodlust rolling. They can have the Bloodlust rolling. They can cleave. They can do a bunch of damage. It's not that hard of a fight, right? It's just Yasma. We've already had one caster curse this dungeon. Why not a second one?
Zyro doing everything he can to just hit that voodoo doll with a few more needles to try to mire down Self-Reliance, while Couch Pepega is working on the totems of Volcal.
Yeah, this is, I mean, maybe hey,
You're
listen,
evil.
maybe they can get the totems to not heal this time. That'd be an improvement over last time, right?
Oh, it's hard.
That's rough. I shouldn't have said that.
That's
They're already
harsh.
so far behind. I'm sorry, guys.
Man.
They know I'm just messing
like
with them.
These guys didn't even bring a Warlock into them, you know? I thought you'd be nicer.
Well, if they brought a Warlock in, I'd have said a lot more mean things.
Oh, well, that's good to know.
Yep.
60% left up on Yasma as Self-Reliance is just finishing off Blood of the Corruptor. All the obelisks are done. Trash percentage is set. And Self-Reliance is poised to get their second victory in the series and move on. But Furrow is trying to make something happen. Zyro, put down the voodoo doll, please.
Don't touch the spiders. They hurt. They do a lot of HP, even on Fortified. They do a lot of damage.
Shooters do indeed hurt.
Yeah, that's not good. Where's your rogue to cloak and run through all of them? Does he have another walk available, Ashville? Are you going to run through and give us a nice puddle on the ground? No? Not going to do that? All right. 40% left on Yasma on Fortified setting. It should be a nice little hop skipping away for Self-Reliance. And this has got to feel good for them, right? They had a really tough first map up against Couch Pepega. You know, when you're a higher in seed, you kind of expect to play better in this lower bracket. And I was, you know, if I were Self-Reliance coming into this match, seeing how Couch Pepega played in their first match of the day, I would have been scared coming in. But, you know, beating a team like this, it's got to feel really good for them.
I think that this is kind of a breath of fresh air for them to be able to move on to tomorrow and get a bit of redemption, because I don't think that today went the way that Self-Reliance wanted it at all. And you know, now they take their victory, they move on to tomorrow, and hopefully they'll be able to continue to build off of this victory.
Yep, hopefully they are going to be moving on into the bracket up against Paint for Femme tomorrow, and unfortunately that will be all for Couch Pepega for this cup, but hopefully we'll see them return even stronger for the next EU and Asia Cup. So congratulations to Self-Reliance, definitely very well played by